It's not often we all become a part of a news story, even though we see news stories all the time. Well, for the next 3 hours, we'll look at the news story everyone was a part of, but didn't get to see.
This is the story of Hurricane Hugo. It's more than a story of a Category 4 storm with 130-mile-an-hour winds. It's more than a story of destruction or even a lack of it. The story of Hugo is the story of people. People at their best during their worst hour.
This is the story of strangers who are now friends, competitors who are now cooperating. Hugo is people bonding together to make a nightmare into a dream of tomorrow.
In a minute, Hugo, the storm, the land, the people. Weather warnings, special reports on hurricanes. We'll all agree that we've seen them so many times, we tend to become oblivious to them. Some were saying it can't happen here. This is just another scare tactic on the part of the media. Well, Hugo was just that until Sunday turned into Monday, and San Juan was bashed with the full force of this killer storm. That's why CBS devoted its hour-long 48 hours to Hugo as it was hitting Charleston. People around the country were with us, watching what we could not see. Here, in an abbreviated form, is the 48 Hours program as it aired Thursday night, September 21st.
It's really scary. The palm trees have been bending. There's been coconuts flying. The wind is very strong.
Tonight on 48 Hours, the hurricane named Hugo.
I'm very sorry to say that about 90% of the people on this island are homeless.
This roof came from across the street there.
We're just picking up what we can find in the street and repairing as best we can.
It looks like a war zone for all practical purposes.
There is no law. There is no nothing.
The looting, unfortunately, is very bad.
I didn't think it could get any worse, but it just continued to get worse and worse.
The conditions along the east coast of the U.S. are much worse than they are in the Caribbean.
Heading our way, we need to be cautious now.
We don't want to be here if it hits.
We don't trust this storm.
You don't know how bad it's going to be.
A killer already.
It would be crazy if we were not to take this hurricane seriously.
So they lose the house, they may lose their life, children.
Turning its pitiless eye toward the American mainland.
If they have somewhere to go inland, they ought to go. Now.
Good evening and welcome to a special West Coast edition of 48 Hours, our special Hurricane Watch 48 Hours. He's already spread death and destruction across the Caribbean, and right now, at this moment, a bigger and stronger Hurricane Hugo is beginning to move into the southeast coast of the United States. The latest, the hurricane is coming ashore somewhere in South Carolina. The winds top-rated 135 miles an hour. That's officially a Category 4 extremely dangerous hurricane. These are live pictures from Charleston, South Carolina, as hurricane-force winds began to move in on the Carolina coast. Those watching the hurricane muscle near their neighborhoods tonight are hoping for the best, but have to be concerned about the worst. And here's why. On its way to the U.S. mainland, the hurricane surged. It surged today. Its character changed. It was upgraded to a 4 category hurricane. That's on a scale of 5. Keeping in mind that in its wake, the hurricane has already left at least 20 persons dead, 100,000 homeless. Because of the importance of this still developing story, we are postponing our scheduled 48 Hours report to bring you this special hurricane edition of 48 Hours, and we're updating it live for those of you on the West Coast. Charleston, South Carolina is smack in Hugo's path. Now, some parts of Georgia, many parts of the Carolinas are beginning to feel heavy winds, torrential rains, rising tides. The coastline could be ravaged by morning. No wonder residents all along this coastline have battened down the hatches, headed to higher ground, hoping to get out of harm's way. CBS News reporter Ron Allen is live in Charleston at this moment because of very dicey communications. He's up live on the telephone. Ron, what is the situation at this moment?
Dan, the winds are really kicking up down here. Torrents of rain are falling. They've been falling consistently for the past couple of hours. the weather is deteriorating rapidly. I just talked to the mayor of this town on the phone, and he says that this community is in grave danger because Hugo is coming directly here. The mayor says that if the Weather Service projections are even close, Hugo will be the worst storm to hit this area in 100 years. The mayor has taken the most unusual step of ordering all police, fire, and rescue units off the streets. It's simply too dangerous for them to be out there, he says. There has also been the first report of injuries, 2 people who were slightly injured who were out in a car somewhere. Streets are flooding, lights are blinking out across town, power is going out even in the hotel where we are trying to broadcast from. The people who run the city have been planning every precaution down to the most minute detail, and they have been worried that residents don't really realize just how dangerous a hurricane can be.
How long have you been preparing for this hurricane now?
Started about 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Well, you know you're going to have a hurricane sometime, so you got to prepare for it. Like a spare tire in the trunk of your car, you carry it because you may have a flat.
24 hours ago, bracing for the worst, Police Chief Reuben Greenberg began full-scale storm preparations.
What's your biggest fear, given this community and given
My biggest fear is people are not going to get out, and they're going to be living in places where it's going to collapse on top of them, and a lot of them are going to be killed and crushed with roofs and so forth.
Don't people understand? I mean, there have been warnings. Everybody knows about hurricanes.
Sure, there's warnings and all that, but it's not going to happen to them. It's going to happen to the other guy. He's going to be unlucky when somehow the storm or any tornadoes that spawns are going to miss their house and get all the other houses instead. That's where people think.
And a lot of low land. You're at about sea level.
It's called South Carolina low country.
For good reason.
Trees are going to be across the road. We have chainsaws in order to get trees.
Throughout the night before the storm, the chief meets with his men to issue last-minute instructions.
The thing that is very, very, very important for you to remember, and that is if you've got a wife, children, grandmother, parents, whatever, you need to get them out of this area. It's going to be very difficult for you to do anything for us worrying about what's going on with them. There are going to be 6 shelters open within the city limits of the city of Charleston with people they've never been with before in their lives, howling babies, arguing, bickering among themselves. At night, it's not going to be a pleasant type situation, okay? Food.
We have the food. We'll be able to feed 300 people for 3 days right here at the department. He's got the food for us. He's getting us some bread.
Okay.
He says, I can get you bread. I said, well,
and they were baking bread there at the Piggly Wiggly.
Shoppers, again, if you just entered the store, we still have some bottled water left up front. We have candles left. We have matches. We still have all sizes of batteries.
What's going fastest? What are you running out of?
Water and batteries. Water and bread. Bread we ran out of numerous times today, and the bakeries, as quick as they bake it, they're bringing it to us. We have trucks running 24 hours a day from our warehouse picking up stuff, resupplying stuff. So we're going to, just keep going.
So did you get everything? You're all stocked up now?
Well, I hope so. I need to get a few batteries, and that will be it. I think I'm hurricane-proof after that.
With the storm drawing closer, time to plan is running out. Chief joins the Crisis Council for a meeting.
This is a meeting where everybody's going to be looking at the last-minute preparations and so forth, make sure everything's working okay.
Who's here?
Oh, mayors of all the towns, chiefs of police, fire chiefs, state agencies, state wildlife, highway patrol. It's going to be wet through there,
We
too.
could be looking at 5,000 low-income people.
No question about it.
Evacuated, and they don't have cars.
Sure.
So they ain't got any place to go.
Sure.
The governor did declare a state of emergency at 6:30 p.m. or thereabouts. They came out of a special meeting, so a state of emergency for South Carolina has been declared.
The dawn offers just a hint of what's to come. After only a few hours of rest, Chief Greenberg is touring the most vulnerable area of Charleston.
Well, this area here is called the Battery, and this is the area where the storm surge and water and stuff are going to be splashing over this thing. People here know that, so you'll see a lot of them have already boarded up.
As more evacuees hit the road, the chief heads for a hurricane shelter that's rapidly filling up.
Everything okay?
Yeah.
How many people do you have here?
About 60 now.
60 now? Here?
Yeah. Most of them are here. Some have gone. They can pick up more.
Food. Boy, what a comfortable looking bed.
This is the community bed.
Boy, I can hardly wait to lay down myself.
I get water and to make my little boy milk.
It's 4 p.m. and Hugo is staring Charleston in the face.
It's going to come in between 1 and 3 o'clock a.m. we're expecting on Friday morning. High tide is at 2 a.m. on Friday morning. So it's going to come, apparently, if it stays at the same speed, at the very worst possible time.
The projection from the mayor when I just spoke to him a few moments ago was that the storm would hit here between 12:30 and 1 Eastern. That's in about an hour and a half or so. But as you can see, things are getting really out of control. The torrents of rain are just falling. I'm doing all I can to just stand here and maintain my balance. Power is blacking out all across town. They've evacuated about 150,000 people so far, and I can't imagine why anybody would stay near here unless they have to. Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Ron. Take care of yourself. Ron Allen live in Charleston as the hurricane begins to hammer in to portions of Georgia and the Carolinas. Because hurricanes move counterclockwise, this hurricane's full fury certainly should be felt north of the eye. That means that Wilmington, North Carolina, just up the coast from Charleston, is headed for a rough night. We caught up with CBS This Morning's main man, Harry Smith, there just a short time ago as communications began to go down.
Harry, you're right there on the northern outer edge of the hurricane. What's it like?
We are right on the banks of the Cape Fear River, which is about 10 miles up from the Atlantic coast, Dan. Down along the coastal areas, we're hearing reports now on the North Carolina coast of winds around 60 miles an hour. We just heard some reports of even hail starting to come out of the storm. Right here, up in Wilmington, it's not too bad yet, although we have had pretty consistent wind gusts of over 40 miles an hour out at the airport. Power is starting to be a bit of a problem here in Wilmington. A lot of the shelters are starting to fill up. One of the high schools is already full beyond capacity with more than 300 people. The power just went out there just a couple of minutes ago. The real power and the real surge from this storm is still several hours away from here yet, Dan, but we're already starting to feel some of the effects.
Harry Smith, thanks. What's ahead as the hurricane hits home? We'll get some idea from looking at what Hugo has left behind as our special hurricane edition of 48 Hours continues in a moment.
Savannah, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Wilmington look to be getting the worst of it as the night wears on. Remember, this is the most powerful East Coast storm in at least 35 years. 48 Hours correspondent Bernard Goldberg's been following it from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida. Bernie, what's the latest at this moment?
Dan, we do have some brand new information. The eye of the storm right now is still offshore, but it's only about 30 miles offshore. And the leading edge of the hurricane, that's the part, Dan, that's packing top winds of about 135 miles an hour. That's only about 10 miles offshore. So that means Charleston and the areas that you mentioned around Charleston should be battered, severely battered, within the hour. Hugo continues moving towards land at about 22 miles an hour, and that's a little faster than it was moving all day today. Now, to put this into some kind of perspective, the last time the Carolina coast was hit by anything like this was way back in 1954 when Hurricane Hazel hit. Damage back then was extensive. Tonight, overnight, early morning, damage almost certainly will be a lot worse.
Bernie, thanks. Be getting back to you a little bit later on. We were going to bring you a live report from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but the winds are already too great there. Our correspondent Frank Courier filed this report just before losing transmission capability.
There is truly a sense of fear and isolation in this town right now. Downtown Myrtle Beach, all but deserted. We were just asked by the authorities moments ago to leave, to evacuate. We are planning to do so. We also learned that the emergency command post set up here in town by city leaders for disaster preparedness, they too are pulling out. They're moving west about 14 miles to the town of Conway. So it appears tonight, with the hurricane upgraded to Category 4, that it's no longer safe to be in Myrtle Beach.
The people who live near that beach where correspondent Frank Courier was standing face what the people of Puerto Rico have faced over the last 48 hours. Correspondent Richard Roth has seen the future.
Just off Puerto Rico's coast, the tiny island of Culebra boasts a sheltered harbor sailors call the safest in the Caribbean. But Culebra was no safe harbor from Hugo.
This is the first major hurricane that hits Puerto Rico in the past 50 or 60 years. We had the wind clocked around 235 miles an hour. This is a killer hurricane, you know. The energy of this hurricane, it's very hard to foresee. You cannot think in terms of that power. It's beyond your expectation. I don't know if that is the right word.
Did it surprise you?
Of course. I have never seen anything like that before.
Rafael Mena owns a hotel here.
The mayor told me there are about 700 homes on the island, and 500 to 600 of them have been damaged or flattened.
Or wiped out. These were houses. These were all houses. Of course. On both sides.
And everything is completely
It's gone. It is gone.
Look at this.
Hey, you guys want some serious footage? I got the whole storm. From 4 o'clock the day before the storm till now, everything. We were out there in 200-mile-an-hour winds. When it started blowing like it did, when it got way out of control, over 180, 190, when it started gusting like it did, I couldn't believe it. We were all life vests on. We were ready to go over. We were scared. I mean, we were really, all of us were like, we've never been in that situation before. I'll tell you what, I've never been so close to dying, none of us.
How are you?
How you doing?
The crews say there were several hundred boats in the harbor at the time of the storm, but more than 2 days later, there's still no reliable count of who's left and who's missing.
Was everybody here on vacation?
Yeah, we're all working tourism. Tourism would collapse in the Caribbean without the boaters.
We are all now the owners of the newest beachfront condominiums in Culebra.
It's not funny.
It's not funny, but that's just
my whole life
is
involved in my boat. Everything I own is there. I've got nothing left but a shell.
People have been unbelievable on this island.
These people are the finest in the Caribbean because they've been so helpful. They are standing there on their front porch of what used to be their house, asking how can they help you. Now, what else can they do?
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Well, this is my house.
Dolly Camareno moved to Culebra from New York City 16 years ago.
This was the kitchen.
This is my dining room, my kitchen. There's a hallway into the bathroom. This is my daughter's bedroom. This is my living room. This is the porch. With a nice view up from here. There's my mattress. My cabinet from the kitchen is on the other side of my neighbor's house.
Just amazing.
It's just devastating. I mean, it looks like an atomic bomb.
It must have broken your heart.
Oh, yeah, I've cried my little bit, but, I mean, when I looked at the rest of the island, I mean, it's devastation. I mean, I just can't be that selfish and think about myself. There's so many people out there. I mean, we've got to stick together.
Have you been able to save much?
I saved all my kids. We're alive and we're celebrating. This is like our final exam. This is like it. If you can survive this, man, we can do anything.
A note here, the storm is expected to dump between 5 and 10 inches of rain, possibly more, as its eye or center comes ashore. The wind will be howling at 125 to 135 miles per hour. What's it like to be in that? A remarkable demonstration coming up soon in tonight's live 48 Hours. Storm surge. If you live in the path of a hurricane, you may find out firsthand what it means. Storm surge is the wall of water formed by the winds of a hurricane. It generally hits before the eye or center of the storm and is responsible for much of the damage and death. This hurricane's storm surge is currently thought to be running more than 10 feet. That'd be a 10-foot wall of water. And tonight, the concern in Georgia and the Carolinas is that the surge may hit right at high tide. That would be especially big trouble for people and property in low-lying areas. With us now is our CBS News hurricane consultant, Dr. Neil Frank, at our station in Houston, the CBS affiliate there. Dr. Frank, what's it going to be like for people in northern Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina?
Well, down in Florida, they're not going to have much of a problem with this, maybe even on the Georgia coast, because the winds will be blowing out of the northwest, and that'll be blowing the water out to sea. The problem is going to be over on the right-hand side of where the eye makes landfall. Now, when I say right-hand side, look in the direction that the hurricane is going. Over on the right-hand side, that's where you're going to see the big winds and the big water. And we're talking about maybe 15 feet of water tonight, and add to that the astronomical tide, and so you're going to have a horrendous problem over there on that right-hand side.
Dr. Neil Frank, back to you later. Thanks. The people who choose to remain in the path of the storm face danger from the surging water and from the wind. To assess the strength of a Hugo-sized hurricane, we sent our intrepid David Martin into the wind tunnel of the University of Maryland. His guide is Jewel Barlow, the director.
In there that this is 50 miles an hour. How does 50 miles an hour compare with hurricane speed?
Well, it's only about 2/3 of hurricane speed.
So you'd call this, what, a tropical storm?
Yeah, probably a moderate tropical storm.
If you're stupid enough to be out in something like this, what would be your advice to somebody that they should do?
If I were caught out in this, I'd get behind something that I thought would stand up to the wind.
I'm tied down, but you're not. Can you go up any higher?
This is probably about all that I can stand and still walk out of here safely.
Okay. You want to go on out, and I'm going to try and take it up a little higher and see if I can get up to hurricane speed.
Good luck.
Okay. And now we're at 70 miles an hour. As hard as that is, that's still not hurricane speed. All right, that's 80 miles an hour. I wouldn't want to stand up straight now because I think I'd be blown right over backwards. That's 90 miles an hour. It feels like the skin's just kind of being ripped off your face. Hurricane speed is 75 miles an hour, so this is a real hurricane, but it's still not as strong as Hugo. Just try and go higher. That's 100 miles an hour. I don't see how you could be out in this. You have to worry about the rain. About things coming at you. The only thing I have to worry about is that camera and it's taped down. I've got one other advantage. I can tell those guys to turn off that air anytime I want. I can't do that with Hugo. Okay, that's 110. I think that's about as high as I can go. It's all right if you can turn it off. But if you don't have any choice over the matter, you really are totally helpless out there in that kind of wind.
It's a catastrophe, but you know, the camaraderie and the spirit has made us bind together, and I think we'll be stronger and better people for it.
The whole community has worked, neighbors with neighbors, and people that we, you know, hardly speak to have gotten together and helped out.
It's been a blessing to all because we are still alive, and we can be thankful for that.
We'll be stronger than ever because behind every dark cloud is a silver lining. And I've lived long enough to see that proved time after time.
I think everybody really pulled together and made it a lot easier for everybody else. That made a big difference.
We can be blown upright again, and that our lives can be strengthened out of this tragedy.
Be patient and keep the faith.
Up-to-the-minute update on the hurricane. The front wall of the eye, not yet the eye itself, but the front wall of the eye of this massive and extremely dangerous hurricane is now coming ashore roughly along the shoreline of South Carolina. Winds raging at 100 miles an hour plus, and the eye itself is not yet over the coastline, so there are yet to come top winds of about 135 miles an hour, and the massive storm surge, that wall of water we've been talking about, is now expected to hit within the next hour, perhaps hour and a half. Charleston, South Carolina, seems to be right in the bullseye, with Hugo moving in.
Attention. Beaver County has...
All day, residents of the low-lying coastal areas from northern Florida to North Carolina have been packing up and heading out. One especially busy spot has been the well-known Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Correspondent Richard Schlesinger followed the evacuation preparations, but then was forced to pull back to Savannah, Georgia because of the danger. Richard?
Dan, the wind and the rain have started picking up here just in the last 45 minutes. It's a miserable night here in Savannah, but nothing compared to our neighbors to the north where Hugo is headed. All day long, the evacuation has gone smoothly. It's been bumper to bumper on the roads around here, but the message from Savannah tonight is people listen to the warnings.
That we'd ask, Father, in the name of Jesus, that you would move the storm from Hilton Head and move it out to sea and keep it there. And we ask it because we know you can do it. Thank you.
On Hilton Head Island, everyone was prepared for the worst in his own way.
We know that you can calm the winds and the waves.
Buzz Stulak came home to his beach house last night, perhaps for the last time.
Hi.
He is a man facing two foes. Hugo forced Stulak to make some tough decisions, the kind of decisions all of us dread.
Well, you said pictures and books. That's all it is.
All right. After a lifetime of accumulating possessions, he has to decide which things he can live without, which few items are so important they must leave with him.
How do you decide what you're going to take? We made out a list last night, and I think it looks like we're adding to the list. It's not supposed to be that big. We're going to take my daughter's photos, tapes of some songs I've written, scrapbooks, photo albums, yearbooks, take my safe with the warranties and insurance policies and stuff in it.
But the toughest decision in Buzz Stulak's life could be made by his second foe, the state of South Carolina.
With us, it was like hanging us out, twisting in the wind. I think that was the expression.
Last year, in a move to open up the beachfront, the state passed a law that prohibits Stulak and his neighbors from rebuilding on the beach if their houses are substantially damaged.
So what do you lose? What do you lose? Everything. For me, it's my life savings. This is the only piece of real estate I own. That's it. I'm wiped out.
So you're really at the mercy of this storm.
Oh, we are. I mean, the next few days will decide whether I have any savings for the rest of my life or whether I start all over again. Sure, there are a lot of folks back there that are rooting Hugo on and hoping, gee, we're going to get our oceanfront park now.
Stulak can fight one of his foes, he's already sued to overturn the law that could cost him his piece of the beach. But he can't fight Hugo.
5 miles an hour, gusting probably up around 115, and there is that direction.
As the evening progresses, so does Hugo, and the threat to Buzz Stulak and his house becomes more real.
That storm, so it looks like that area is probably a pretty good estimate, anywhere from St. Augustine all the way to Cape Hatteras,
right
where we have the hurricane watch.
Right in a
and by the
straight
way,
line.
the hurricane watch indicating that hurricane force conditions.
I mean, I don't like that storm, and you can even look out there and you can see where it's coming. I've considered that ever since I moved here 7 years ago. Those things may happen, and if it does, that's fine.
It's just the risk of living here.
That's right. And I'm prepared to leave.
Still prepared. I, as of 0600 this day, Beaufort County has issued a hurricane warning. Evacuation orders have been issued for all residents.
Before dawn this morning, the word came.
All residents are urged to leave the island as soon as possible. Hurricane Hugo is expected to make landfall later this afternoon between Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina.
One of Buzz's foes, the hurricane, could no longer be ignored. Time to leave.
Oh, this is sad. It's, I hope it's here when we come back.
But if Hugo wins, if he damages or destroys the house, Buzz vows to fight again against his second foe, the state. He'll be fighting for the right to build and live on this beach again. Bye-bye.
Some Charleston, South Carolina residents are bracing for the hurricane in a city shelter. With them tonight is CBS This Morning's Kathleen Sullivan. Kathleen, good evening.
Hi, Garrett. Hi, Dan. I'm in the Garrett High School gym. There are about 390 people in here. Believe it or not, a lot of these people have been here since midnight. You just missed the late night snack. They had a little peanut butter and honey sandwich, and they're serving the fruit right now. And it's surprising that a lot of these people have been in here since midnight, but a lot of it is because of the preparation, the efforts made by the city here, including that of Mayor Joe Riley. Mr. Mayor, why did you start advising these people, what was it, Tuesday afternoon?
We studied with other cities that had difficult hurricanes, and our advice was to scare the people, because the greatest danger is people not evacuating and being caught in rising water. So we tried to communicate it strongly so people wouldn't say, oh, we've been through that before. Because with this storm surge, people in low-lying areas and one-story houses would be killed. And we feel very good at these sites because it means that they heeded our warning, and they've taken shelter, and hopefully we've saved a lot of lives.
Well, Mr. Mayor, actually, when you look at this and you see these people, do you think they're happy? I mean, have they been well fed? I mean, they haven't really had a meal today. They get 3 meals tomorrow now.
They seem very happy. I've toured a lot of shelters, and they're relaxed. They know they're going to be safe, and makes us feel very good.
When you and I talked this morning on CBS This Morning, you said you were going to stay in your house, and I understand that you were evacuated by your own efforts today.
I did. I followed my own advice.
So where are you staying tonight, Mr. Mayor?
I'm staying at City Hall. My family is inland, and I'm with our command post at our historic, beautiful City Hall. Everybody ought to come and see it when the hurricane's over, and we'll be on top of everything happening in the city, and hope we can escape it without the loss of life.
One thing, your worst fear tonight.
Worst fear is the tide, the rising water, and trapping people.
Mr. Mayor, we'll all be in here together. Dan?
Thanks, Kathleen Sullivan. Maybe this is as good a time as any in our live Hurricane Watch Special Edition of 48 Hours to say, of course, we have to emphasize the danger of hurricanes, big winds, rising tides, storm surge, but people can ride them out. The key is to know that you need to stay alert, be smart, pay attention to the weather forecasts and the warnings. And we want to say directly and personally to those who are in the path of this storm, we care about you, we're thinking about you. And for the past 48 hours, Bernard Goldberg has been watching the people watching the storm at the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
Tremendous. Rises up there. Falls. Rise right here.
We'll have a little bit more trouble maybe tracking it by satellite.
24 hours, 22.5, 66 bill.
It's a little funny dog, the 4860 dog. We have the big high pressure area that's been over here, and the little trough you see in here.
They may have high-tech science on their side here at the Hurricane Center. They may be the best in the business.
It's a 6 p.m. advisory we're talking about, which is...
But all they know for sure when it comes to hurricanes is that there's an awful lot they don't know for sure. with all the maps, with all the computers, with the satellites, with the weather balloons, with everything else you've got. They're really, well, why is there no such thing as certainty when it comes to hurricanes?
If I could take a snapshot, a Polaroid picture of the atmosphere right now, and said freeze,